There comes a moment when heaven itself moves, when the silence of waiting is broken, and the shift you've been praying for is set in motion. You've endured, you've held on, and you've wondered if God had forgotten you. But I'm here to tell you, your waiting is over. The door that once seemed shut is about to swing wide open. The prayers that felt like echoes in an empty room are about to bring forth divine answers. But are you ready? Are you prepared for the transformation that God is about to unleash in your life? This is not just another season. This is a divine shift. And if you are not aligned, you may miss it. Stay with me, because this message will change everything. The waiting season is one of the most misunderstood aspects of our faith. Many believers cry out to God asking when their breakthrough will come, but few realize that God has been working in the background all along. His timing is not a delay, it is preparation. You see, God never rushes anything. When He does something, it is perfect. And now He is saying the time of waiting has been fulfilled. What you thought was a season of delay was actually a season of refinement. Your struggles were never pointless. They were orchestrated to shape you into the person who could handle the blessing that is coming. When Joseph was thrown into the pit by his brothers, he didn't know that his time in waiting would elevate him to the palace. He could have given up. He could have become bitter, but instead he trusted God's process. The very ones who tried to bury him were the ones who witnessed his rise. I tell you today, your waiting has not been in vain. The suffering, the loneliness, the tears you cried in the dark, they were all part of a divine setup. And now the Lord is saying, it is time. But let me warn you, when God shifts you, it won't look the way you expect. It never does. When God moved Israel out of Egypt, they didn't walk into the promised land immediately. They had to pass through the wilderness. And why? Because God was not just changing their location, He was changing their mindset. Some of you have been crying for change, but your mind is still in captivity. Your habits, your fears, and your doubts are still rooted in the past. But God is saying, I am shifting you forward, whether you feel ready or not. The Bible tells us in Isaiah 43:19, behold, I am doing a new thing. Now it springs forth. Do you not perceive it? That means God is already moving. He is already opening doors, aligning people and setting things in place. But do you perceive it? Can you sense the shift in the Spirit? Some of you have been so focused on the struggle that you don't even realize you have stepped into the new season already. You are still acting like you are waiting, but God has already made the way. Look at Peter. He was in prison, locked up, bound by chains. But the angel of the Lord came in the middle of the night, struck him on the side, and told him to get up. When he stood up, the chains fell off. Listen to me. God is about to strike you on the side. He is about to wake you up, and the things that have held you back are going to fall off. But you must be ready to move. Peter could have stayed seated, doubting what was happening, but he got up and followed the angel out of the prison. Some of you are sitting in open prison cells, not realizing that your chains are already broken. It's time to move. Faith is not just believing, it is moving when God says move. It is stepping forward when nothing makes sense. When God told Abraham to leave his homeland, He didn't give him a map. He simply said, go to the land I will show you. Abraham had to walk before he saw the destination. That is what God is asking of you right now. The shift is happening, but you must step into it. Do not let fear keep you from what God has prepared. The enemy will always try to convince you that you are not ready, that you are not worthy, that you are not capable. But when God calls you, He equips you. Look at Moses. He doubted himself. He said, Lord, I am slow of speech. But God wasn't concerned with Moses' ability. He was concerned with Moses' obedience. The shift is not about your qualifications. It is about your willingness to follow. Some of you have been comfortable in your suffering because it is familiar. You have adjusted to the wilderness, and now you fear the promised land. But hear me. God did not bring you this far to leave you. He did not let you endure all those trials just to abandon you. He is a faithful God. He is a God who completes what He starts. And He is saying, your waiting is over. The enemy is terrified of what you are about to step into. He has tried to delay you, distract you, and discourage you, but he has failed, because what God has ordained, no man can stop. The doors that are opening for you have been set by God himself. No enemy, no opposition, no setback can close them. But you must walk through them. You cannot hesitate. You cannot second guess. You cannot shrink back into the shadows of fear. I declare over you today that the season of waiting has ended, that what was stagnant is now moving, that the favor of God is resting upon you, that the breakthrough you have been crying for is now at hand. But will you recognize it? Will you embrace it? Will you step into it with faith? Because when God shifts you, everything changes. People who once overlooked you will suddenly see the glory on your life. Doors that were locked will suddenly swing open. Opportunities that seemed impossible will now be placed in your path. But remember, this shift is not about material things. It is about positioning. It is about purpose. It is about stepping fully into who God created you to be. Do not make the mistake of thinking this is just another season. No, this is a divine turning point. This is a God-ordained acceleration. And those who are aligned with him will experience a transformation unlike anything they have seen before. You have been waiting long enough. You have been praying long enough. And now God is saying, move. Will you obey? Will you walk into what he has prepared for you? Because the shift has already begun. The only question left is, are you ready? When God moves, he moves suddenly. One moment Joseph was in prison, and the next he was standing before Pharaoh. One moment David was tending sheep, and the next he was anointed king. One moment Peter was fishing, and the next he was following Jesus. God's shifts happen quickly, but they don't come without preparation. The years of trials, the seasons of waiting, the moments of loneliness, these were all part of the process to prepare you for what is coming. And now that the time has arrived, you cannot afford to hesitate. God is calling you to step out of the shadows. He is calling you to rise into the position he has destined for you. This is not the time to shrink back in fear. This is not the time to question whether you are worthy. God already knew your weaknesses when he called you. He already knew your struggles, your doubts, your insecurities. And yet he still chose you. Because it was never about your strength. It was always about his. The shift that is happening in your life is not something you have to force. It is something you have to walk into. The doors are opening, but you must walk through them. Think about the Israelites at the Red Sea. The enemy was behind them and the sea was in front of them. Fear tried to grip their hearts. They could have turned back, but God had already set the path before them. All they had to do was walk forward. And when they did, the waters parted. The miracle wasn't just in the parting of the sea. It was in their obedience to move when God said, move. Some of you are standing at your own Red Sea, hesitating because you don't see the way forward. But God is saying, move and I will make the way. The shift doesn't require you to understand everything. It requires you to trust him completely. Too many believers are waiting for perfect conditions before they step out. They say, Lord, I'll go when I have more resources. I'll move when I feel more confident. I'll obey when things make more sense. But faith doesn't work that way. Faith moves when there is no evidence, when there is no clear sign, when everything in the natural looks impossible. Faith doesn't wait for clarity. Faith walks in obedience. Abraham left his homeland without a destination. Peter stepped out of the boat onto water. The disciples followed Jesus without knowing where the journey would take them. That is the kind of faith that God is calling you to right now. The problem is not that God is not speaking. The problem is that many of us are not listening. We are too distracted by our own expectations, by our own fears, by our own comfort. God is saying, I am shifting you into a new season, but you are still clinging to the old one. You cannot step into what's next if you are still holding on to what was. Lot's wife turned into a pillar of salt because she looked back. She was too attached to where she came from to fully embrace where God was taking her. How many times has God tried to shift you, but you resisted because you were too afraid to let go of the familiar? When God calls, he expects obedience. He is not looking for excuses. He is not waiting for you to feel ready. He is looking for those who will move when He says move. The shift you have been praying for is not just about receiving blessings. It is about stepping into divine purpose. Some of you are about to be placed in rooms you never imagined. You are about to be given opportunities you never saw coming. But you must be prepared. You must be spiritually alert. Because when God elevates you, there will be resistance. Look at David. When he was anointed king, he didn't step into the palace immediately. He had to face Goliath. He had to endure Saul's jealousy. He had to go through battles before he sat on the throne. Many of you are facing giants right now, and you think it's a sign that you are not where you are supposed to be. But the enemy doesn't fight people who are going nowhere. The warfare is confirmation that you are on the brink of something great. Don't be discouraged by the opposition. It is proof that the shift is real. The enemy will try to make you doubt yourself. He will whisper lies saying you are not strong enough, not qualified enough, not worthy enough. But let me remind you, God does not call the qualified, He qualifies the called. He used Moses, who doubted his own voice. He used Gideon, who saw himself as weak. He used Esther, who had no royal bloodline. He used Peter, who denied Him. He used Paul, who persecuted Christians. And He is going to use you. This is why you cannot allow fear to paralyze you. You cannot let insecurity keep you from stepping into your purpose. The shift is happening whether you feel ready or not. God is not waiting for you to be perfect. He is waiting for you to be obedient. When Samuel came to anoint David, David wasn't even considered by his own family. He was out in the fields, unseen, overlooked. But God saw him. God knew his heart. And when the time came, no one could stop what God had already ordained. You don't have to fight for the shift. It is already written. What God has declared over your life is already set in motion. No enemy, no setback, no delay can change it. But you have to move. You have to take action. You have to align yourself with what God is doing. The reason many people miss their season of breakthrough is not because God didn't answer. It is because they weren't willing to move when the answer came. They waited for another sign. They questioned whether it was really their time. But when God opens a door, you cannot hesitate. You must walk through it with confidence. Think about the woman with the issue of blood. She had been suffering for years. She had spent all her money looking for a cure. But one day she heard that Jesus was passing by. She didn't wait for an invitation. She didn't hesitate. She pushed through the crowd, reached out, and touched the hem of His garment. And in that moment, she was healed. What if she had stayed in a house waiting for Jesus to notice her? She would have missed her breakthrough. Some of you are waiting for God to bring the miracle to you, but He is saying, reach out and take it. God is moving in your life right now. The signs are all around you. The doors are opening. The opportunities are coming. The connections are being made. But it is up to you to step into it. Do not be like the Israelites who stood at the edge of the promised land but were too afraid to enter. They saw the giants and they let fear stop them. And because of that, they wandered in the wilderness for 40 more years. Do not let fear delay your destiny. Do not let doubt keep you from what God has prepared. The time of waiting is over. The shift is here. The only question is, will you step into it? Will you trust God even when you don't have all the answers? Will you move forward even when fear tries to hold you back? Because the ones who move in faith will see the manifestation of God's promises. The ones who obey will walk into the destiny that has been prepared for them. And the ones who recognize the shift will never be the same again. When the appointed time of God arrives, nothing can stand in the way of His purpose. The chains that held you back for years will break in an instant. The doors that seem permanently closed will open with divine favor. The voices that told you it would never happen will be silenced by the undeniable move of God in your life. And when He moves quickly. There is no hesitation in His plan, no uncertainty in His purpose. The question is not whether God will fulfill His promise, but whether you will be ready to receive it. Many people pray for breakthrough but do not prepare for it. They ask God to open doors, but they remain stuck in old mindsets. They desire new blessings but continue operating in past failures. This is why some remain stagnant. Not because God is not moving, but because they are not shifting with Him. Jesus told the parable of the 10 virgins. 5 were wise, 5 were foolish. The wise ones kept their lamps filled with oil, ready for the moment the bridegroom would arrive. The foolish ones assumed they had more time, but when the moment came, they were unprepared. And because of their unpreparedness, they missed the door when it opened. This is the season to stay vigilant. The enemy wants you distracted, caught up in things that do not matter, stuck in patterns that keep you from stepping into what God has prepared. He wants you to remain in cycles of fear, doubt, and procrastination. But this is not the time to hesitate. The moment of divine acceleration is here. Just as Joseph was elevated overnight from the prison to the palace, so will God's sudden move bring shifts in your life that no one can explain. When God decides to move, He does not need permission from your past. He does not consult with those who doubted you. He does not check with your failures before promoting you. When He speaks, it is settled. It was this certainty that made David run toward Goliath when others shrank back in fear. It was this confidence that made Joshua march around Jericho when the walls still stood tall. It was this trust that made Esther step before the king, knowing her life was at risk. And it is this same faith that God is calling you to walk in now. You cannot wait until everything is perfect before you act. Faith does not wait for evidence. It moves on God's word. The woman with the issue of blood did not wait for Jesus to call her name. Blind Bartimaeus did not wait for the crowd to accept him. They moved in faith, and because of that, they received their miracle. The move of God that is coming to your life will not be gradual, it will be sudden. But sudden shifts require sudden obedience. You must be ready to move when He says move. Many times people delay their own breakthrough because they question whether they are truly worthy. They look at their past, their weaknesses, their flaws, and assume that God cannot use them. But God has never called perfect people. He called Moses despite his stutter. He called Gideon despite his fear. He called Rahab despite her past. He called Paul despite his history of persecution. And now He is calling you. Not because of your qualifications, but because of His grace. The enemy will try to make you believe that you are not ready, that you are not equipped, that you are not good enough. But God does not choose based on human standards. He chooses based on His purpose. When Samuel was sent to anoint the next king of Israel, he saw Jesse's sons and assumed the strongest, the tallest, the most impressive would be the one. But God said, man looks at the outward appearance, but I look at the heart. And the one who was overlooked, the one who was left in the fields, was the one God had chosen. You may have been overlooked by people, but you have never been overlooked by God. You may have been rejected by others, but you have always been accepted by Him. The shift that is coming to your life is not based on human approval. It is based on divine selection. And when God selects you, no one can stop it. When He opens a door, no one can shut it. When He declares a thing, it is already established. This is why you must walk in boldness. The time for doubting yourself is over. The time for questioning whether it will happen is over. The time for waiting on another confirmation is over. The shift is already in motion. And those who align themselves with it will see the hand of God move in ways they never imagined. Think about Peter when he saw Jesus walking on water. He said, Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you. Jesus said, come. And in that moment, Peter had a choice. Stay in the boat where it was safe, or step out onto the water where the impossible became possible. He chose to step out, and for a moment he walked in the supernatural. But when he took his eyes off Jesus and focused on the wind and the waves, he began to sink. The lesson is clear. When you focus on God, you will walk in the miraculous. When you focus on fear, you will sink. Right now, you have a choice. You can stay in the boat of comfort, or you can step into the unknown where miracles happen. You can hold on to the past, or you can embrace the shift that God is bringing into your life. The people who will experience the fullness of this season are those who refuse to let fear dictate their steps. Some of you have been asking God for a sign. You've been saying, Lord, if this is really my time, show me. But the signs have already been there. the doors that are opening, the divine connections that are happening, the stirring in your spirit, it is all confirmation that God is moving. The only thing left is for you to act. When Nehemiah heard about the broken walls of Jerusalem, he didn't wait for someone else to fix it. He didn't say, maybe one day God will send help. He got up, gathered resources, and started rebuilding. He faced opposition, but he kept working. And because he moved in obedience, the walls were rebuilt in record time. There are things in your life that God is calling you to rebuild. There are dreams He is calling you to resurrect. There are assignments He is calling you to complete. But it will not happen if you remain passive. The moment of acceleration is here, but acceleration only happens when you start moving. The enemy knows that he cannot stop God's plan, so his strategy is to make you stop yourself. He will plant seeds of doubt, make you second-guess your calling, try to keep you in a cycle of hesitation. But the Spirit of the Lord is saying today, move forward. Do not wait for the perfect moment. Do not wait for everything to align. Walk by faith, and the provision will come. Walk by faith, and the resources will appear. Walk by faith, and the impossible will become reality. When the Israelites were in the wilderness, God provided manna every morning. But they had to get up and gather it. The manna did not fall into their hands. It fell to the ground, and they had to take action. Some of you are waiting for blessings to fall into your hands, but God is saying, get up and take what I have already provided. The opportunities are there. The shift is there. The promise is there. The promise is that you must move. Do not allow fear to keep you where you are. Do not allow excuses to rob you of your destiny. The shift is already happening, and those who step into it will see the supernatural favor of God. What you thought would take years will happen in moments. What you thought was impossible will become reality. What you thought was lost will be restored. The waiting season has ended. The time of delay is over. The moment is now. The question is, will you move? Will you step forward in faith? Will you trust God even when the path is uncertain? Because those who move in faith will see what others only dream of. Those who obey will experience what others only talk about. And those who recognize the shift will walk in the fullness of what God has already prepared. When the Spirit of God moves, He moves with purpose and He moves in power. His shift is never random, never accidental. It is an orchestrated divine plan that has been set in motion long before you were even aware of it. There are moments in life where the hand of God aligns circumstances so perfectly that you have no choice but to recognize that it is His doing. You are in such a moment right now. This is not an ordinary season. This is not just another time in your life. This is the appointed time, the Kairos moment. The season when everything shifts because God has declared it so. You have felt the weight of waiting. You have endured seasons where nothing seemed to change, where prayers felt unanswered, where promises seemed distant. But what you did not realize was that God was working in the unseen. He was preparing the way. He was moving things into position. He was shifting hearts, aligning resources, breaking obstacles that you never even knew existed. And now the moment has come for you to step into what He has prepared. But here is what you must understand. When God shifts things, He does not do it halfway. When He brings change, it is complete. When He opens a door, it is undeniable. When He moves you from one season to the next, there is no mistaking it. This is why you must be ready to let go of everything that belongs to the past season. You cannot hold on to old ways of thinking. You cannot cling to what was. You cannot try to bring yesterday into today. God is doing a new thing. And if you try to force old patterns into this new move, you will hinder what He is trying to release in your life. Consider Abraham. God called him out of his homeland, away from everything familiar, into a place that He would show him. Abraham did not know where he was going. He did not have all the details, but he obeyed. And because he obeyed, he became the father of many nations. What if he had stayed? What if he had refused to move? He would have missed the promise. And some of you are standing at that very place right now, a place where God is saying, move, but fear is whispering, stay. You cannot afford to miss what God is doing because of fear. Fear is the enemy's greatest tool. He uses it to paralyze you, to make you doubt, to keep you stuck in the same cycle of hesitation. But the Spirit of the Lord is saying, this is the time to move beyond fear. What God is calling you into is greater than your comfort zone. It is bigger than what you can control. It requires faith. And faith is not about knowing every step. It is about trusting the one who is leading you. Think about Peter again. When Jesus called him to walk on water, Peter did not wait for the storm to calm down. He did not wait for the winds to stop. He stepped out in the middle of the storm. And because he stepped out, he walked in the supernatural. Some of you are waiting for perfect conditions before you move. But God is saying, step out now. If you wait for the storm to pass, you will miss the miracle. You have prayed for breakthrough, but breakthrough requires action. You have prayed for favor, but favor follows obedience. You have asked God to open doors, but when the door opens, will you have the courage to walk through it? Do not let hesitation rob you of what God has already released. Do not let doubt talk you out of what has already been promised. Look at the Israelites. They stood at the edge of the promised land, a land flowing with milk and honey, a land God had already given to them. But because of fear, they doubted. They saw giants instead of the promise. They saw obstacles instead of opportunity. And because of their doubt, they wandered in the wilderness for 40 years. The promise was right in front of them, but they never entered because they let fear control their decisions. This is why you must be spiritually alert. The enemy knows he cannot take away what God has given you, but he will try to convince you to walk away from it. He will plant thoughts in your mind that make you question whether you are ready, whether you are capable, whether it will really happen. But you must silence those voices. You must fix your eyes on what God has said. You must stand firm in the word he has given you. Some of you have been given visions, dreams, assignments that seem impossible. You have seen glimpses of what God wants to do in your life, but you have hesitated because it looks too big. But here is the truth. If it was something you could do on your own, it would not be from God. The fact that it looks impossible is proof that it is divine. God never calls you to something that you can accomplish in your own strength. He calls you to things that require His power, His provision, His anointing. This is why He told Joshua, be strong and courageous. 3 times God said it, be strong and courageous. Why? Because Joshua was stepping into a new season. He was leaving behind the wilderness and stepping into the promise. But to take hold of the promise, he had to be bold. He had to trust. He had to move forward even when the enemy stood in front of him. And because he did, he led an entire nation into their destiny. You are at that same moment. The shift has already been declared. The breakthrough has already been released. The only thing left is for you to step into it. But here's what you must understand. Stepping into the shift does not mean you will not face challenges. It does not mean everything will be easy. It does not mean there will be no resistance. In fact, the enemy fights hardest when you are closest to your breakthrough. When Jesus was about to start his ministry, he was led into the wilderness to be tempted. When Joseph was about to step into his purpose, he was thrown into prison. When David was anointed king, he still had to face Goliath. Every time a shift happens, there is opposition. But opposition is not a sign that you are failing. It is a sign that you are moving in the right direction. The devil does not attack people who are going nowhere. He does not fight people who are stagnant. He targets those who are stepping into their God-ordained destiny. And that is why you have felt so much pressure. That is why you have faced unexpected challenges. That is why the enemy has tried to discourage you, because he knows what is coming. He knows that once you step fully into what God has for you, he will have no power to stop it. So do not retreat. Do not shrink back. Do not let temporary trials make you doubt an eternal promise. Stand firm. Move forward. Keep your eyes on Jesus. Because the shift that is happening in your life is not just for you. It is for those connected to you. Your obedience is going to impact others. Your faith is going to unlock doors, not just for yourself, but for generations after you. When God shifts things, it is never just about one person. It is about legacy. It is about purpose. It is about kingdom advancement. That is why the enemy fights you so hard. That is why he tries to make you quit before you see the breakthrough. But quitting is not an option. Fear is not an option. Doubt is not an option. The only option is to move forward in faith, knowing that what God has started, He will finish. This is the season of fulfillment. This is the moment of divine acceleration. The waiting is over. The preparation has been completed. The shift is here. And those who step into it will see the power of God move in ways they never imagined. This is not a time to look back. This is not a time to hesitate. This is the time to walk boldly into everything that God has declared over your life. Because when God says move, the only right response is obedience. And those who obey will see the impossible become reality. When God declares a shift, it is not just a change in circumstances, it is a divine transformation. It is a supernatural realignment where everything that has been out of order suddenly falls into place. What seemed delayed now arrives at the perfect moment. What seemed impossible now becomes inevitable. When God speaks, His word does not return void. It accomplishes exactly what He sent it to do. And right now, His word over your life is moving things into motion. You must recognize the signs of a divine shift. Many people miss their moment because they are expecting God to move in a certain way. But God rarely does things the way we predict. The Israelites expected a mighty warrior to deliver them, but God sent Moses, a man who once fled Egypt in fear. Naaman expected a dramatic healing, but God told him to dip in the Jordan River 7 times. The Pharisees expected a conquering king, but God sent Jesus, who came in humility and power. If you are waiting for God to move in the way that makes sense to you, you may miss what He is already doing. Sometimes His shift comes disguised as an uncomfortable situation. Sometimes His promotion looks like a problem at first. Sometimes His breakthrough begins with an act of obedience that does not seem logical. But God is not bound by human logic. He is the God who brings water from a rock, who makes walls fall with a shout, who feeds multitudes with 5 loaves and 2 fish. His ways are higher than our ways, and when He moves, you must move with Him. You may feel like you have been in a season of transition for a long time. You have sensed that something is changing, but you have not seen the full manifestation yet. That is because God has been preparing you internally before shifting you externally. The greatest moves of God do not start in the open. They start in the secret place. Before David was a king, he was a shepherd. Before Joseph ruled in Egypt, he endured betrayal, slavery, and imprisonment. Before Jesus performed miracles, he spent 40 days in the wilderness. The preparation always precedes the promotion. This is why your waiting season has been so critical. It was never about delay. It was about development. God was strengthening you in the unseen places. He was stretching your faith, refining your character, increasing your endurance. He was breaking you free from the limitations of the past so that when the shift came, you would be ready to carry the weight of what He is releasing. Do not despise the process. Do not resent the waiting. It has been necessary, and now the time has come for manifestation. But with every shift comes a decision. God can open the door, but you have to walk through it. He can give the instruction, but you have to obey it. When Jesus told Peter to cast his net on the other side, Peter had a choice. He could have relied on his own understanding and refused, or he could trust the word of the Lord and obey. Because he obeyed, he caught so many fish that his nets began to break. His greatest breakthrough came when he did something that did not make sense in the natural, but was commanded in the spiritual. Some of you are one act of obedience away from your breakthrough. God has already spoken, He has already confirmed, He has already given direction, but you're still analyzing, still debating, still hesitating. What are you waiting for? If you delay too long, you can miss the moment. There is a window of divine timing that you must step into. The Israelites delayed their obedience, and an 11-day journey turned into 40 years. That is not what God intended, but their hesitation cost them time. Do not let fear cost you time. Do not let doubt rob you of what has already been declared. The enemy knows he cannot take away your promise, so he tries to convince you that it is not real, that you are not ready, that it is not for you. But God did not make a mistake when he chose you. He did not make a mistake when he called you. He knew exactly what he was doing. You are the one he has anointed. You are the one he has positioned for such a time as this. God is stirring a fire inside of you, a fire that will not let you settle for less than what he has spoken. You have felt that restlessness, that deep knowing that there is more. That is not your imagination. That is the Holy Spirit pushing you into alignment. You were never meant to stay where you are. You were never meant to live beneath your calling. You were never meant to live in spiritual survival mode. You were created to walk in power, to operate in authority, to fulfill a divine assignment that is bigger than you. The enemy has tried to wear you down. He has tried to make you feel weary. He has tried to keep you in cycles of frustration, but that season is over. The shift has already been declared, and the things that held you back will no longer have power over you. The doors that were closed will now swing wide open. The battles you have fought in the dark will now turn into testimonies of victory. You are stepping into the fulfillment of everything God has spoken, and nothing can stop it. The key now is focus. When Nehemiah was rebuilding the walls of Jerusalem, his enemies tried to distract him. They sent messages trying to lure him away from his assignment. But Nehemiah responded, "I am doing a great work and I cannot come down." That must be your mindset. You cannot afford to be distracted. You cannot afford to waste time on things that do not align with your purpose. This is not the time to entertain negativity. This is not the time to let other people's opinions dictate your decisions. This is not the time to second guess what God has already confirmed. Stay focused. Stay in prayer. Stay in the presence of God. Because when the shift happens, it will happen suddenly. One moment Joseph was in a prison, and the next he was standing before Pharaoh. One moment Esther was just a Jewish girl in exile, and the next she was a queen with the power to save her people. One moment Paul was persecuting Christians, and the next he was preaching the gospel. When God moves, he moves swiftly. This is why you must be ready. The opportunity will come suddenly. The breakthrough will happen suddenly. The doors will open suddenly. Do not be caught unprepared. Do not allow distractions to cause you to miss the moment. Position yourself in faith. Position yourself in expectation. Because what is coming is bigger than you can imagine. God is not just shifting your circumstances. He is shifting you. He is stretching your faith, enlarging your vision, increasing your capacity. What he is about to release requires a new level of wisdom, a new level of responsibility, a new level of spiritual maturity. That is why you have felt the pressure. That is why you have experienced the stretching, because he is making you into the person who can handle what is coming. Get ready. The time of waiting is over. The season of delay has ended. The appointed time has arrived. And you are stepping into everything God has promised. Do not hold back. Do not shrink back. Move forward with boldness, with confidence, with unwavering faith. Because what is coming is not just for you, it is for everyone connected to you. Your obedience will bless generations. Your faith will shift atmospheres. Your yes to God will unlock doors that no man can shut. This is the moment heaven has been preparing you for. This is the season where everything changes. This is the time when your faith meets fulfillment, when your prayers turn into reality, when your waiting turns into walking in the promise. It is here. It is now. Step into it. The time of waiting is over. The season of preparation has led you to this defining moment where God is shifting you into his divine purpose. Everything that has happened, the struggles, the tests, the delays, was never meant to destroy you but to position you. Now the doors are opening, the breakthrough is manifesting, and the promises of God are coming to life before your very eyes. This is not just another season. This is a divine appointment. But the shift requires your faith, your obedience, and your unwavering trust in God's plan. Do not shrink back. Do not hesitate. When God moves, you must move with him. Lay aside fear, step beyond doubt, and walk boldly into what has already been declared over your life. Heaven is backing you. The power of God is propelling you. The anointing on your life is making a way where there seemed to be none. The waiting has ended and the shift has begun. Now is the time to rise, to step forward in faith and to claim everything God has spoken over you. Move now, because your appointed time has arrived and nothing can stop what God has set in motion.